Jake Morrison stood in the massive chamber of the Galactic Council, his hands steady despite the rage burning inside him. The report in his grip contained numbers that made his stomach turn. 847 human civilians dead, men, women, and children who had been traveling to Mars colonies for new lives. Now they were nothing but scattered debris floating in the cold vacuum of space. The alien delegates filled the enormous room with their strange forms and stranger sounds. The Zephyrians towered above everyone else, their crystal bodies catching the artificial sunlight and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. Their leader, Vorthak, stood nearly 12 feet tall, his crystalline face showing no emotion that Jake could read. Beside him, the collective representatives chittered and clicked in their insect language. Their Hive Queen Nexus sat on a raised platform, her 6 arms moving in complex patterns, while her compound eyes watched everything at once. Jake had been Earth's ambassador for 5 years. He had seen alien arrogance before, but never like this. Never this casual dismissal of human life. The Zephyrians and their collective allies had attacked human ships 3 times now. Each time they claimed it was an accident or a misunderstanding. Each time more humans died. Admiral Lisa Carter watched from the human section, her uniform crisp and her face like stone. She commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled, but even she knew it was small compared to what the aliens could bring to bear. Earth had been part of the galactic community for only 20 years. The other species had been spacefaring for thousands of years. They had bigger ships, better weapons, and more experience. But they had never fought humans before. Jake stepped forward to the speaking platform. The chamber fell silent except for the constant humming of alien machinery and the soft chittering of the collective. He looked up at the towering forms around him and spoke in a clear voice that carried to every corner of the vast space. 3 times now, ships belonging to the Zephyrian Empire and their collective allies have attacked human civilian vessels. The first time you claimed it was a navigational error. The second time, you said our ships entered restricted space without permission. Today, you killed nearly 900 innocent people and you tell us it was self-defense. Vorthak's crystal face reflected light as he turned toward Jake. When the Zephyrian spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Ambassador Morrison, your species continues to expand into space without proper respect for established territorial boundaries. The collective and the Empire have legitimate security concerns. Jake felt his jaw tighten. Security concerns. You destroyed a passenger transport carrying families. Their children's toys are still floating in space. The Hive Queen Nexus made a sound like grinding metal. Her translator device spoke in a flat mechanical voice. Human emotional responses are irrelevant to galactic security. Your species lacks understanding of proper cosmic order. Around the chamber, other alien delegates nodded or made sounds of agreement. The 4-armed Deltans, the gaseous nebula wanderers, the machine-like constructors. None of them seemed to care that hundreds of humans had died for no reason. Captain Ryan Hayes sat in the back of the human section, his hand resting on his communication device. His ship, the USS Defiance, waited at the edge of the solar system with the rest of the human fleet. He had fought pirates and rebels, but never in a real war. None of them had. Humans had been peaceful since joining the galactic community. They had followed the rules, respected boundaries, and tried to fit in. Dr. Elena Brooks sat beside him, her tablet showing data streams from across human space. She was Earth's chief military strategist, though most aliens didn't know that. They saw her as a simple scientist. They had no idea that she had spent the last 5 years studying every alien military formation, every weapons system, every tactical doctrine used in galactic warfare. They had no idea that she had been preparing for this day since the first human ship left Earth. Jake continued speaking, his voice growing harder with each word. For 3 years, we have tried diplomacy. We have followed your laws, respected your territories, and asked only for the same consideration. You have answered with violence. You have murdered our people and called it policy. Vorthak made a sound like breaking glass. Jake realized the alien was laughing. Human ambassador, your species has been in space for barely 2 decades. The Empire has ruled these systems for 10,000 years. The collective has maintained order for even longer. You speak of consideration as if you have earned it. Other aliens joined in the laughter. The sound filled the chamber like a symphony of mockery. They saw humans as children playing with toys they didn't understand. They saw Earth as a small, insignificant world with delusions of importance. Jake looked around the chamber one more time. He saw contempt in every alien face that could show expression. He saw dismissal in every gesture. These beings had decided that human life was worthless. They had decided that Earth could be bullied, threatened, and attacked without consequence. He activated his communication device. Across human space, every military installation, every ship, every hidden base received the same message at the same time. Admiral Carter straightened in her chair. Captain Hayes felt his heart start beating faster. Dr. Brooks closed her tablet and began entering codes on a different device. Jake Morrison looked up at Vorthak and spoke words that would echo across the galaxy for generations. One more strike against our people and we end this. Not your ships, not your fleets. We end this entirely. The crystal being made that breaking glass sound again, louder this time. Mammalian posturing. Your species lacks the capability to threaten the Empire or the collective. Nexus added her mechanical voice to the mockery. Human warfare tactics are primitive and predictable. Your emotional nature makes you weak. Jake smiled, and something in that expression made Admiral Carter's blood run cold. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator that had been patient for far too long. You have been warned, Jake said simply. Then he turned and walked out of the chamber, followed by every human in the room. Behind them, the aliens continued laughing. They had no idea that they had just signed their own death warrant. The warning from the Galactic Council had reached every human settlement within hours, but it came too late for the people of Beta 7. Captain Susan Torres stared at her view screen in horror as the Mercy approached what had been a thriving asteroid mining colony just 6 hours earlier. Where 3,000 people had lived and worked, now there was only twisted metal and frozen bodies drifting in the vacuum. The Zephyrian and collective fleets had not simply destroyed the colony. They had broadcast the attack across subspace frequencies, making sure that every human outpost in 3-star systems could watch their people die. The aliens wanted humanity to see their power. They wanted Earth to understand what happened to species that did not know their place. Susan had been a rescue captain for 12 years. She had pulled miners from collapsed tunnels, evacuated colonies from asteroid strikes, and saved crews from failing life support systems. But she had never seen anything like this. The aliens had targeted the residential sections first, then the schools, then the medical centers. They had made sure the civilians had nowhere to run before destroying the industrial areas. Her communication officer, Lieutenant Gary Scott, looked up from his console with tears in his eyes. Captain, we're receiving automated distress signals from 17 different locations. The computer systems kept broadcasting even after the life support failed. Susan nodded grimly. Those signals would have been screaming into space for hours while the colonists suffocated or froze to death. The aliens had wanted the broadcasts to continue. They had wanted every human in the sector to hear their people dying. Record everything, she ordered. Every piece of debris, every body, every signal. Command needs to see exactly what they did here. Back on Earth, President Amanda Foster sat in the emergency bunker beneath Denver, watching the same footage that was being transmitted across human space. The images were being shown on every news channel, every public screen, every military communication system. She wanted every human to see what their enemies were capable of. General Marcus Stone sat across from her, his weathered face hard as granite. Admiral Lisa Carter stood at the tactical display, her hands clenched into fists. Dr. Elena Brooks worked at her station, pulling up files that had been classified at the highest levels for years. Jake Morrison entered the room still, wearing his formal diplomatic robes, but his face showed none of the diplomatic calm he had displayed at the Galactic Council. They didn't just attack us, he said quietly. They executed civilians and made sure we watched. The president looked around the table at the people who would decide humanity's future. Options. Admiral Carter spoke first. Our conventional forces are outnumbered 50-1. If we fight a standard fleet engagement, we'll lose within days. General Stone nodded. They have better shields, better weapons, and more ships. In a straight fight, They would crush us. Dr. Brooks looked up from her console. That's why we're not going to fight a straight fight. She activated the main display, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. Red dots marked Zephyrian, Empire territory. Blue dots showed collective systems. Green dots represented human colonies and outposts. But there were other markers, too. Yellow dots scattered throughout alien space. For 5 years, every human civilian ship, every trading vessel, every exploration craft has been mapping their infrastructure. We know where their shipyards are, where they store fuel, where they grow food, how they move supplies. We know which systems are vital and which ones are just for show. President Foster studied the display. You're talking about total war. I'm talking about ending this permanently, Dr. Brooks replied. They want to treat us like animals, like pests to be, exterminated when convenient. They think we're weak because we've been peaceful. They think we're stupid because we haven't been building giant fleets. She brought up another display showing human space. It looked almost empty compared to the alien territories. Just a few green dots around Sol and the nearest star systems. But as she adjusted the display settings, new markers appeared, thousands of them. Hidden bases in asteroids, weapons platforms disguised as mining equipment, supply depots that looked like empty space on scanners. We've been preparing for this since first contact, Dr. Brooks continued. Every civilian ship carries military, grade sensors. Every mining operation can be converted to a weapons factory in hours. Every transport can become a troop carrier. They see weakness because they don't understand how humans really fight. Admiral Carter smiled grimly. They're expecting us to line up our ships and trade shots like gentlemen. They have no idea what's coming. General Stone activated his communication array. All units, this is Stone. Execute Protocol Omega. Full authorization, no restrictions. Across human space, the transformation began immediately. Civilian transports powered up weapons systems that had been hidden in their cargo holds. Mining stations revealed missile batteries that had been disguised as ore processing equipment. Even the smallest outposts activated defense grids that had been built into their foundations. Captain Ryan Hayes felt the USS Defiance shudder as the ship's true capabilities came online. Hidden weapon ports opened along the hull. The ship's mass driver, which appeared to be a simple cargo launcher, revealed itself as a weapon capable of accelerating projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. Around him, the rest of the human fleet was undergoing the same transformation. But Hayes knew the real surprise was not the weapons. It was the targets. Commander Alex Turner led the first strike group, but they were not heading toward alien military bases. Instead, his ships moved toward the supply convoys that kept the alien war machine running. Captain Diana Ross took her stealth squadron toward communication relays that connected alien fleets to their command centers. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Davis prepared ground teams that would capture key infrastructure instead of destroying it. The aliens expected a war between fleets. Humanity was about to show them what happened when every civilian in your territory was a potential enemy, when every supply run became a combat mission, when your own success became your weakness, because the bigger your empire, the more places your enemies could hit you. President Foster stood and addressed the emergency council. Gentlemen, lady, we are about to show the galaxy what human warfare really looks like. Not the honorable fleet battles they're used to. Not the gentlemanly exchanges of fire between military units. We're going to teach them why apex predators don't pick fights with their own young. She activated the global communication system. Every human settlement, every ship, every outpost would hear her words. Citizens of Earth and her colonies, today our enemies learned that there is a difference between peaceful and harmless. They have attacked our families for the last time. We have tried diplomacy. We have followed their rules. We have been patient. Now we show them what happens when you back a human into a corner. The message went out on all frequencies, transmitted in every language used by the galactic community. The aliens would hear it too, but by then it would be too late. The war they had started was about to become something they could never have imagined. Captain Torres completed her recording of the Beta 7 massacre and transmitted it to Earth Command. As the Mercy turned away from the debris field, she activated her ship's hidden weapon systems. Like every other human in space, she was no longer a civilian. She was a soldier in a war that would reshape the galaxy. The aliens had wanted to send a message with their attack on Beta 7. They wanted to show humanity what happened to species that didn't know their place. Instead, they had just made the Biggest mistake in galactic history. They had turned every human in the galaxy into their enemy, and they were about to learn why that was a very bad idea. Commander Alex Turner watched his tactical display as the Zephyrian supply convoy approached the ambush point. 12 massive cargo ships protected by only 4 escort vessels, carrying enough processed crystals to power an entire fleet for months. The aliens had grown careless over thousands of years of unchallenged dominance. They had forgotten that supply lines could be targets. Turner's strike group consisted of 8 ships disguised as civilian traders. The aliens would see them as harmless merchants until it was too late. He opened a channel to his squadron. Remember, we take the cargo ships intact if possible. We need those supplies for our own operations. The ambush lasted exactly 4 minutes. The human ships dropped their disguises and surrounded the convoy before the Zephyrian escorts could react. Turner's flagship disabled the lead escort with a precisely targeted electromagnetic pulse that fried its control systems without destroying the ship. The other escorts surrendered rather than face destruction. But Turner was not interested in prisoners or glory. While his boarding teams secured the cargo ships, he transmitted the convoy's position to 3 other human squadrons waiting in nearby systems. Within hours, the aliens would lose 12 more supply convoys using the same tactics. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn what happened when every trade route became a battlefield. Halfway across the galaxy, Captain Diana Ross and her stealth squadron had already begun their own mission. The collective relied on instantaneous communication between their hive worlds through a network of biological relay stations. These living computers allowed the insect-like aliens to coordinate their vast empire as if it were a single organism. Diana's ships were invisible to alien sensors, using human stealth technology that worked on completely different principles than what the aliens expected. Where alien stealth relied on energy fields and exotic materials, human stealth used simple physics and clever engineering. Her ships looked like empty space because they absorbed all incoming sensor signals instead of deflecting them. The first relay station died without ever knowing it was under attack. Diana's team used focused particle beams to disrupt the biological computers that kept the station functioning. To the rest of the collective network, it looked like a simple equipment failure, the kind of thing that happened occasionally in any complex system. But as more stations went offline across collective space, the Hive Queens began to realize something was wrong. Their perfect unity was fracturing as distant worlds stopped responding to central commands. Fleets that had been coordinating their movements suddenly found themselves operating blindly, unable to communicate with their neighbors. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Davis was demonstrating an entirely different aspect of human warfare. While the aliens expected armies to fight armies, his special forces teams were infiltrating civilian infrastructure, not to harm innocents, but to take control of the systems that kept alien civilization running. Davis himself led a team that captured a Zephyrian power distribution center on the edge of their empire. The facility supplied energy to 17 different star systems, including 3 major military bases. Instead of destroying it, his team simply locked out the alien control systems and began redirecting power according to human priorities. Military bases found their energy supplies reduced to minimum levels. Civilian population centers continued, receiving full power, but only if their governments agreed to remain neutral in the conflict. Worlds that continued supporting the war effort against humanity found their lights going out one by one. The genius of the human strategy was becoming clear to alien commanders who had studied warfare for millennia. Humans were not trying to destroy their enemies. They were taking control of them. Every captured facility became a human asset. Every severed supply line weakened the alien ability to continue fighting. Every communication relay that went offline made coordination more difficult. Captain Tony Williams had been given perhaps the most dangerous mission of all. Using captured collective biotechnology, he had infiltrated the hive mind network itself. The insect-like aliens believed their biological communication system was impossible for other species to access. They had never imagined that humans would volunteer to have alien hardware implanted in their own brains. Williams felt the constant buzzing of alien thoughts at the edge of his consciousness as he fed false information into the network. Fake reports of human fleet movements. Incorrect. Supply requirements. Orders that contradicted each other and sent collective forces to empty systems while humans struck elsewhere. The Hive Queens realized something was wrong when their fleets began arriving at battle sites to find nothing but empty space, but they could not identify the source of the bad information. The network was too vast, the data streams too complex. By the time they started shutting down communication nodes to stop the false reports, their coordination had already collapsed. Major Kate Murphy was leading ground forces that redefined what planetary assault meant. Instead of landing armies to fight alien defenders, her teams captured strategic infrastructure and then invited the aliens to attack their own facilities. Spaceports, water treatment plants, communication centers, power grids, all vital to civilian populations, all now under human control. The aliens faced an impossible choice. They could attack the human-held facilities and destroy the infrastructure their own people needed to survive. Or they could leave the humans in control and watch their planets slowly fall under enemy influence. Either way, they lost. Murphy stood in the control center of a Zephyrian communication hub, watching alien fleet movements on captured displays. "Send a message to the planetary government," she ordered her communication specialist. "Tell them they can have their facility back as soon as they withdraw from the war and declare neutrality. Until then, we're happy to keep the lights on for their civilians." Across the galaxy, the same scenario played out on hundreds of worlds. Human forces that numbered in the thousands were effectively controlling planets with populations in the billions. Not through fear or brutality, but through simple practical control of the systems that made modern civilization possible. Admiral Lisa Carter watched the strategic reports flowing in from across human space. Her conventional fleet had not fired a shot at an enemy warship, but the human military was winning the war through methods that no alien had ever imagined. "Status report," she requested from her intelligence officer. "Zephyrian Empire has lost 60% of their logistics capability. 7 major worlds have declared neutrality rather than face infrastructure shutdown. Their main fleet is trapped in the Centauri system because they don't have enough fuel to reach human space. And the collective? Communication breakdown is complete in their outer territories. Hive Queens are losing control of entire sectors. 3 worlds have requested human assistance in maintaining basic services in exchange for neutrality agreements." Carter nodded grimly. The aliens had expected a glorious war between fleets. Instead, they were watching their civilizations slowly grind to a halt as humans demonstrated that modern spacefaring societies were far more fragile than anyone had realized. Dr. Elena Brooks had been right. The aliens' size and technological advancement had become their weakness. The bigger their empires, the more places humans could attack. The more complex their systems, the easier they were to disrupt. The more they relied on centralized control, the more devastating it became when that control was compromised. Humanity was not fighting to conquer alien worlds. They were fighting to survive as a species, and a species fighting for survival was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Vorthak stood in the dimming light of his crystal palace, watching the great city of Zephyr Prime slowly die around him. The towering spires that had gleamed with captured starlight for 10,000 years were going dark one by one. The energy flows that had powered his empire were no longer under his control, redirected by human forces that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. His military advisors brought him reports that made no sense. Human fleets that appeared on sensors and then vanished before his ships could reach them. Supply convoys that simply disappeared between star systems. Communication networks that carried false orders and contradictory information. Most disturbing of all, entire worlds that had declared neutrality rather than face the slow strangulation of their infrastructure. "How many ships do the humans have?" Vorthak demanded, his crystal voice harsh with frustration. General Kyrex, his chief military officer, made the Zephyrian equivalent of a helpless gesture. "Intelligence estimates range from 500 to 50,000, my lord. They appear to be using some form of technology that makes accurate counting impossible." 50,000 ships? That's impossible. They've only been in space for 20 years. "The humans are not fighting the way we expected, my lord. They do not mass their fleets for direct engagement. Instead, they operate in small groups that strike quickly and then disappear. Our traditional tactics are useless against them." Vorthak moved to the great window that looked out over his capital city. Once, millions of Zephyrians had lived and worked in the crystalline towers below. Now, half the city was empty, as power shortages forced citizens to relocate to areas where the humans still allowed energy to flow. It was humiliating beyond measure. Across the galaxy, Nexus faced similar problems in the core systems of the collective. The Hive Queen sat in her command chamber, her 6 arms moving frantically as she tried to re-establish communication with her outer territories. The biological networks that had connected her empire for millennia were corrupted, carrying false information and contradictory orders. Her subordinate queens brought reports of chaos from across collective space. Fleets that had been coordinating perfectly just weeks ago were now operating in isolation, unable to communicate with Central Command or each other. Worse, many of the outer Hive worlds had stopped responding entirely, either destroyed by human forces or voluntarily cutting themselves off from the network to prevent further contamination. "How are they doing this?" Nexus demanded, her mental voice echoing through the chamber. "No other species has ever penetrated our bio-network." Queen Zara, her chief intelligence officer, replied with obvious distress. "The humans appear to have incorporated our own technology into their nervous systems. They are broadcasting false information directly into our communication streams. We cannot distinguish their signals from our own. Then shut down the network entirely. My queen, without the network, our coordination will collapse completely. We will become thousands of isolated worlds instead of a unified collective. Our military advantage depends on our ability to act as one mind." Nexus realized the trap the humans had set. The collective's greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. Their unity made them powerful, but it also made them vulnerable to anyone who could corrupt their communication system. The humans had turned their own advantages against them. Admiral Carter watched the strategic displays in Earth Command, tracking the systematic collapse of both alien empires. Her forces had not won a single traditional fleet engagement because they had not fought any. Instead, they had done something far more devastating. They had proven that modern civilization was fragile, and that humans understood exactly where to apply pressure to bring it crashing down. Captain Ryan Hayes commanded one of the few traditional warships in the human fleet, but even his missions had little to do with fighting enemy fleets. Today, he was accepting the surrender of a Zephyrian task force that had been stranded without fuel in a system whose supply depot had been captured 3 days earlier. "Zephyrian Commander, this is Captain Hayes of the USS Defiance. We are prepared to accept your surrender and provide humanitarian assistance to your crews." The response came in broken English, the alien commander clearly struggling with the unfamiliar language. "Human Captain, we request safe passage to neutral territory. We no longer wish to participate in this conflict." Hayes looked at his tactical officer. "Any other Zephyrian forces in the system?" "Negative, sir. This appears to be the last military unit still loyal to the Empire in this sector. It was a pattern repeating across both alien territories. Military units were surrendering not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they no longer had the supplies to continue fighting. Entire worlds were declaring neutrality because their populations faced starvation or energy shortages if they continued supporting the war." Dr. Elena Brooks analyzed the data streams coming in from across the galaxy. Her strategy was working even better than she had hoped. The aliens had built their empires on the assumption that their enemies would fight according to established rules of warfare. They had never imagined facing an opponent who ignored those rules completely. "Status report," Admiral Carter requested. "Zephyrian Empire is effectively finished as a military power. 80% of their worlds have declared neutrality or surrendered. The remainder are isolated and cut off from supplies. Emperor Vorthak himself is requesting negotiations." "And the collective?" "Complete communication breakdown. The Hive Queens have lost control of their outer territories. Many worlds are operating independently now, and several have requested human protection from other collective forces." President Foster joined the briefing via secure communication from her bunker. "Casualties?" "Human military casualties remain under 2,000. Alien military casualties are estimated at less than 50,000. Most alien deaths have been from infrastructure failures rather than direct combat." The president nodded grimly. "And civilian casualties?" "Minimal on both sides. The humans specifically avoided targeting civilian populations, and the infrastructure controls have actually improved living conditions on many alien worlds by providing more efficient resource Distribution. It was the most important number of all. Humanity had fought a total war without becoming monsters. They had destroyed 2 galactic empires without committing genocide. They had proven that it was possible to win completely while maintaining moral principles. Colonel Nancy Lee commanded the humanitarian missions that were becoming the most visible part of human operations. Her teams provided food, medical supplies, and technical assistance to alien worlds whose governments had collapsed. But they did so only for planets that agreed to permanent neutrality and non-aggression pacts. It's not about conquest, she explained to a Zephyrian planetary governor who was requesting aid for his starving population. We don't want to rule your world. We just want to make sure you never attack human civilians again. The governor, a being whose crystal body had lost much of its inner light due to malnutrition, nodded eagerly. We agree to all human terms. Please, our children are dying. Lee activated her supply ships, but she also posted human observers who would monitor the planet's compliance with the neutrality agreement. Any sign of military buildup or hostile activity would result in immediate withdrawal of aid and return to infrastructure blockade. Jake Morrison stood once again in the Galactic Council chamber, but this time the atmosphere was very different. The same aliens who had laughed at his warnings now sat in sullen silence, many of them representing governments that no longer existed. The Zephyrian and collective delegations were gone entirely, their empires reduced to a handful of isolated worlds. The solar doctrine is now in effect across the galaxy, Jake announced to the assembled delegates. Any unprovoked attack on human civilians will result in immediate and overwhelming response against military and infrastructure targets. Any government that supports such attacks will face systematic dismantlement of their civilization's foundations. The key. Alien delegates listened in silence. They had learned what human warfare really meant. Not the honorable fleet battles they were accustomed to, but something far more terrifying. The complete transformation of their own advantages into weaknesses. The systematic destruction of everything that made their civilizations possible. Humanity had kept its promise. They had ended it. Not with massive fleets or powerful weapons, but with something far more dangerous. They had shown the galaxy what happened when a species that thought 20 moves ahead decided that their children were more important than galactic politics. Jake Morrison walked into the rebuilt Galactic Council chamber 6 months after the war had ended, but everything had changed. The massive room that had once echoed with alien laughter at human warnings now held a very different kind of silence. Representatives from dozens of species sat quietly in their assigned sections, but the balance of power was unmistakable. Humanity occupied the central position that had once belonged to the Zephyrian Empire. The transformation was visible everywhere. Human security officers stood at every entrance, their presence a quiet reminder of who now maintained galactic peace. Translation devices bore human-made components that allowed Earth Command to monitor all communications. Even the lighting had been adjusted to human preferences, casting everything in the warm yellow glow of Sol rather than the harsh blue radiance the aliens preferred. Admiral Lisa Carter entered wearing the uniform of the new Galactic Patrol Force, followed by representatives from what remained of the alien governments. Former enemies now served as junior officers under human command, having learned that cooperation brought prosperity, while resistance brought the systematic dismantlement of everything they valued. Vorthak was among them, his once magnificent crystal form now dim and cracked. The former emperor of the greatest alien power in the galaxy now served as a regional administrator for human relief operations. His empire had been reduced to 7 worlds, all of them dependent on human infrastructure support for basic survival. Nexus had suffered an even more complete fall. The collective consciousness that had once controlled thousands of worlds now existed only in her own mind. Her hive network had been so thoroughly corrupted by human infiltration that the surviving collective worlds refused to reconnect to any central authority. They preferred independence to the risk of another human information warfare campaign. The Galactic Council will now come to order, Jake announced, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. Today, we formalize the agreements that have maintained peace for the past 6 months. He activated the main display, showing a map of the galaxy very different from the one that had existed before the war. Large sections that had once been red for Zephyrian territory or blue for collective space were now marked in neutral gray. independent worlds that had chosen isolation over the risk of human attention. Green markers showed human territory, which had grown modestly but strategically, encompassing key trade routes and resource systems. Captain Ryan Hayes stood at the military section of the display, representing the human fleet that now patrolled previously hostile space. His ship, the USS Defiance, had been joined by vessels from former enemy species, all of them operating under human command doctrine. The aliens had learned that human tactical thinking was superior to anything they had developed in millennia of traditional warfare. "The solar doctrine remains in full effect," Jake continued. "Any attack on human civilians triggers immediate response. But we have expanded the doctrine to include attacks on any civilian population by any government. The galaxy has seen enough senseless slaughter." Dr. Elena Brooks had established the Strategic Studies Institute on Centauri Station, where alien military officers came to study human methods. The lessons were always the same. Humans did not fight to prove their honor or demonstrate their strength. They fought to win decisively and permanently. They thought in terms of systems and vulnerabilities rather than ships and weapons. A Deltan representative raised one of his 4 arms. "Ambassador Morrison, what guarantees do we have that humanity will not use these same methods against species that have remained neutral?" Jake smiled, but it was not the predatory expression he had worn during the war. "The same guarantee you have always had. We are not interested in ruling other species. We are interested in protecting our own. As long as you pose no threat to human civilians, you have nothing to fear from human military capabilities." The answer satisfied no one completely, but everyone understood the reality behind it. Humanity had demonstrated capabilities that no other species could match. Their willingness to use those capabilities was directly proportional to the threat faced by human civilians. The safest policy for any government was simply to leave humans alone. Colonel Nancy Lee presented the humanitarian aid reports that had become a cornerstone of human galactic policy. Former enemy worlds received food, medical supplies, and technical assistance, but only in exchange for permanent neutrality agreements and regular inspections. Planets that maintained their agreements prospered under human efficiency improvements. Those that violated their commitments found themselves facing infrastructure blockades that could cripple their civilizations within days. "Compliance remains at 97%, she reported. "The 3 worlds currently in violation have been notified that aid will be suspended until they return to full neutrality status." It was a gentle form of control, but control nonetheless. Humanity had learned that destroyed enemies could rebuild and seek revenge. Dependent allies, however, had too much to lose to risk conflict. Captain Tony Williams had transitioned from infiltrating alien networks to building new ones. The communication systems that now connected the peaceful portions of the galaxy all contained human-designed components, not to spy on alien governments, but to ensure that any coordination against human interests would be detected immediately. "Network integrity remains optimal," he reported. "All member governments are maintaining their communication protocols within acceptable parameters." What he did not say, but everyone understood, was that human intelligence services now had real-time access to virtually all galactic communications. Privacy existed only for species that remained completely isolated from the galactic community. Major Kate Murphy had established training facilities where human and alien security forces learned to work together. But the curriculum focused heavily on human methods of asymmetric warfare, infrastructure protection, and civilian population management. Alien officers learned to think like humans, which meant thinking several moves ahead and always protecting the most vulnerable members of society. "Graduation rates continue to improve," she reported. "Joint operations between human and alien security forces have prevented 14 potential conflicts in the past month alone. The prevention was as important as the victory had been. Humans had learned that wars were expensive and dangerous, even when you won them completely. Better to prevent conflicts through superior intelligence and rapid response than to fight them after civilians had already died." President Amanda Foster addressed the Council via secure transmission from Earth. 6 months ago, 2 galactic powers decided that human life was expendable. Today, every government in this chamber understands that civilian populations of all species are under human protection. This is not because we seek to rule the galaxy, but because we have learned that peace requires someone to be willing and able to enforce it. The president's words carried weight that went far beyond their diplomatic phrasing. Everyone in the chamber knew what human enforcement looked like. The systematic dismantlement of everything that made modern civilization possible. The transformation of advantages into weaknesses. The patient, methodical destruction of any threat to innocent life. Jake Morrison concluded the session with words that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. We did not ask for this responsibility. It was forced upon us by species that mistook patience for weakness and restraint for inability. But we have accepted it. Human children learn chess before they learn to walk, because we understand that protecting what matters requires thinking ahead. We think 20 moves ahead, and we always protect our own. He paused, looking around the chamber at representatives who had once laughed at human warnings. The galaxy is safer today because everyone understands what happens when you threaten our young. Earth's warning will continue to echo across the stars for as long as humans exist. One strike against our civilians, and we end it, completely, permanently. And we have the capability to keep that promise. The chamber remained silent as the implications settled. The species that had mastered space for millennia had been taught, their place by newcomers who had been spacefaring for barely 2 decades. But it was not conquest that kept them quiet. It was the understanding that humans had been generous in victory, and that generosity would continue only as long as the peace was maintained. Earth's warning echoes across the stars, reminding the galaxy that some species are more dangerous when protecting their families than others are when conquering empires, and in the end, that made all the difference.